Go live. Live at 8 p.m. Weather Center live at 8 p.m. on the dot. 8 p.m. 8 p.m. live. 8 p.m. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to keep saying that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Weather Center live, and I have some exciting news, not only in regards to the weather, but just overall the rhythm of this channel very soon, which is very good and honestly very relieving for me as well. We're going to get started here in a moment. Taking a look at our half-disc infrared shot as opposed to the water vapor shot that we were looking at during our earlier segment. We're going to kind of use this to highlight our big picture weather pattern. We're going to talk variables and exactly what kind of differences and changes we've seen in that potential severe weather event for the eastern half of the United States at this point, as well as some of the portions of southeastern Canada, Ontario, Quebec, the James Bay area moving to the east through Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and so on. So our neighbors up there in Canada are going to see some threats from this as well. Quite a variety of threats, to be honest. We're going to have kind of different quadrants of this storm that we're going to have to do battle with. We're going to have our tropical-ish impacts down in the south and southeast. In the mid-Atlantic, we're going to have our polar-style impacts, our modified polar impacts, and then closer to the Great Lakes and up into the northeast and into eastern Canada, that's where we're going to see some bona fide pseudo-Arctic/polar impacts and a very solid gradient between our rain and snow begin to form up, as well as some sleet and freezing rain predicted in there as well. And then we'll also kind of take a little trip down in the tropics, dig a little bit more further into what I'm seeing that could possibly happen for our Yucatan, Belize, and parts of other Central America countries. Also talk a little bit about this activity that's going on in the tropical Atlantic that's expected to propagate a little further to the west, maybe bring some increased rainfall to our windward. I accidentally left the blooper. Well, I didn't accidentally. I intentionally left that blooper in the video earlier. Our, what did I say? Our windward islands, but I meant to say our, I forget exactly what I said. Our Lesser Antilles, our windward, particularly our windward islands. And the Guianas, I also realized I was saying that wrong the entire time. Guianas. I was saying Guyanas, Guianas, French Guiana. I was saying Guyana the entire time. So I do apologize if I have any folks down in that general area watching. Going to do some quick analysis while we wait for some folks to join. Look at all this stuff going on. Lots and lots of stuff to track. Lots of good old stuff to track. Then we got this big old ridge over central and western Conus, helping to increase some of the warm air advection. Why is my mouse kind of petering out on me? But all right, folks, for the end of the itinerary, once we get to about the 30-minute window of this live stream, we're actually going to take a quick trip over to YouTube because I found this. This was recently uploaded by National Weather Service Lake Charles 4 days ago, and it's an entire 15-minute loop of this year's hurricane season, so kind of like an internal recap of everything that went on, and we can kind of spectate exactly how it broke down towards the end of the live stream. We'll get there. But, all right, so while we continue to have some folks trickle in, Zenful, hello there. Matt F150, good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. Glad to be back. I was still dealing with family issues, but I'm back. Welcome back, sir. Glad to hear that things are opening up a little bit to the positive realm on your side of the spectrum. Hopefully we can all continue to go further into the positive as we get closer and closer to Christmas time. I'm officially done with my fall semester. Let me tell you, chemistry and animal biology were a little more stressful than they should have been, especially chemistry. But we are done, and I passed the classes, so that's all that I care about. 4 classes and 12 credits closer to my meteorological degree, or meteorology degree. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We have this huge cold plunge that made its way across the eastern and southeastern United States, providing us with some really wonderful weather down here. In fact, I should have my window open before it gets really hot in here. I'm going to do that, actually. Give me 1 second. There we go. Crack open the window and save on the AC prices. So, wow, and the wind's blowing. I already feel it coming in. That's the cold front. We had this frontal system come through. It has now picked up subtropical jet support. You can see it's still, this is going to be an icon for all winter and into spring, guys. Just letting you know now. If you hear me start a brief and I mention something about subtropical jet, El Nino, I mean, it's there and it's active. And it's very cool. I was watching that 2023 satellite recap of the hurricane season earlier, and you can clearly see when it really turns on. The brief instance it turned off to let Idalia form up and come towards Florida, and then when it kicked right back in again. Very interesting stuff. We'll finish the video or the live stream with that. If you look out across here, the western extremity of the United States, out over the Pacific. In fact, I'll just do you one better, and we'll take a little wander over there real quick. We'll go across the planet, and we'll see exactly what we have going on. So here we go. Quite an aggressive setup, to tell you the truth. Very aggressive. You can see right in through here, if we were to do a little bit of analysis, here's our Arctic jet moving across like so. We got some Arctic jet activity, or our northern branch activity. And then look at how our polar front is totally meridional all the way through here. Very meridional pattern in store for us, which means that we are expected to have quite a bit of enhanced weather activity. Now, the thing is, if you guys look right in through here particularly, and I'll switch my color again, right in through here, there's a little bit of breakaway jet energy trying to reform into a bit more of a lower amplitude ridge, or a broad amplitude ridge here. And I do notice that our models long range want to take this trough in particular, and as it scoots off to the east, we're going to try to cut it off over the Four Corners and Desert Southwest. And that's going to try to allow our pattern to go just a little bit more zonal and allow us to get a bit of a break or a hiatus before we get another couple rounds of storm systems, not only across the south, but for our Great Lakes and Northeast, Midwest regions. Degenerate, yeah, ask a non-relevant question. Of course, that's what we're here for. We can have all sorts of casual conversation. It's always welcome here in the Weather Center. Mick and Marley, thank you very much. Good to see you. NM3, thank you very much. I do appreciate you. Thanks for joining. Dark Earth, hello there, ma'am. Good to see everybody. We got a quiet group tonight. Usually the chat's popping off. We don't have Miss Leah tonight. We don't have Ethan tonight. We don't have How Close Is It, or How Close Are We? We don't have PM. We have a lot of people lagging tonight. What's going on? What's up with that? Maybe because maybe we're not hyping anything enough, so that's why they're like, we're just going to skip out. I'm just kidding. Let's see here. I'm going to turn down my mic volume because I noticed earlier when I was shooting my video, it seemed like it was a little on the loud side too. So we're just going to tone down the decibels a little bit. But yeah, so this is what we have. Oh, there he is. How close are we? Perfect. You're still here. Well, I shouldn't say still. You are here. So yeah, we have our very meridional pattern with the potential of seeing a cutoff entity form in this wave, if you will, this long wave way out there over the Central Pacific. I mean, it still hasn't even crossed the same longitude line as Hawaii yet, so still a couple thousand miles away. That's what we're kind of tracking. Here is what we're expecting based on WPC's frontal analysis. So you can see that we are pretty calm and collected right now. We have really good bona fide polar high pressure across the Central Plains, the lower Midwest, Appalachians. And then as we go through time, you notice out west we have a very, very sharp increase in our rainfall, precip, and wintry mix action as that system begins to work its way across the Rockies. I thought this was pretty cool. I thought this was pretty neat. We actually have a dry line setup that is analyzed per WPC, and you know what? I can't entirely argue with that. The dry line is typically something we see set up and establish itself predominantly wandering back and forth between central and, eastern Texas sometimes, and west Texas, eastern New Mexico during the summer. It'll go back and forth like so. I'll show you the dew points and the theta E chart specifically, and you'll see that you could really make a case for a dry line setting up out there just because of the stark contrast in air masses that we have brewing up over the south and southeast and over the Pac Northwest and the northern tier states. And yes, Dark Earth, there's definitely going to be continuous amounts of flooding, unfortunately, because of the atmospheric river that is just continuing to funnel straight into the Pacific Northwest. Not necessarily alfalfa, not necessarily, because what's going to end up happening here is as I continue through the WPC loop, let's say, for instance, we go to 12 Zulu next week and then 12Z on Wednesday, we could see a little bit of activity down over the south, but with a cutoff entity, you don't typically see a whole lot of aggressive upper level influence to help bring up our surface instability, or in layman's terms, we don't have an aggressive jet and vorticity to help kind of stir things up in the low levels. So it'll all predominantly be low level activity we have to watch out for. That's why if you notice here, we have some shower activity maybe for the south, some leftover showers for Florida in way of this stationary boundary that's expected to linger across the Bahamas, the northern periphery of the Caribbean. And then if you look, a lot of our fronts are going to start staying to the north, at least for a period of time, while we have very, very good high pressure kind of just elongated west to east across the United States. And I'll show you the jet here in a moment. It'll make a little bit more sense when we look at that. Speaking of the jet, here we go. So there's our first trough coming across, deepening down. This is what's helping to try to produce, and I say try loosely, because we will likely see some severe weather with this, but because of the orientation of it, notice how here we are very positively tilted, whereas before, previous to this, we were expecting more of a neutral to a negative tilt already beginning to take shape in our trough. So this is a good sign that we may not see as widespread of significant thunderstorm activity, at least initially, at least until this stuff gets going. Because as you trake this through the loop, we are still expecting it to take on a bit more of a negative tilt, especially as it comes across the southeast and the mid-Atlantic, and then ejects up to the northeast, and really becomes negatively tilted before it gets absorbed by what looks to be a branch of the northern branch of the jet, trying to slip some energy in there as well. And then if you look, as we get that next trough in, notice how as it goes across western Conus, it tries to break off. And as it breaks off, the jet begins to reorient ever so slightly to the north and kind of move itself up over the Canadian provinces like we saw on WPC. And then we have our next trough that looks like it tries to break off as well before making it into the west coast and try to get us just a little bit more zonal. Still higher amplitude, but a little bit more zonal. And notice here that our subtropical jet, our lower latitude jet, has taken on the full appearance of what we would see in El Nino, screaming across the Gulf, kind of moving over Florida, as opposed to doing this fashion or this number like we've been seeing for the last couple weeks now. Why did Amazon cancel my order when I used my gift card? That's a good question. I'm not sure. Could you look at Cyclone Jasper? Yeah, absolutely. Here in a moment. Let's get through some of the slides, and then we'll look at the 2023 satellite loop. Here's our Euro mean sea level pressure. I didn't really take... excuse me. I didn't take too much... I might need some water. I apologize. I didn't take a whole long look at this today. But if you look, we are still expecting quite a heavy bout of rainfall to form not only for our south and southeast, but I do think that we are going to have an increased threat for some severe weather in the mid-Atlantic states this time. I definitely do think that's a possibility, especially with such tremendous amounts of warm air advection occurring along the leading edge of the system, and then very, very intense cold air advection really, really knocking that stuff out of its direction or out of its path. Ethan, hello there. So this model doesn't do too good of a job in highlighting the full extent of how aggressive these thunderstorms could get, but I do think that we're going to start to see a little bit of expansion in what SPC highlights in terms of their severe weather outlook. Like, I would not be surprised if we see a little bit of an extension further into the Appalachians, like so, kind of doing this number. And obviously, we're not actually going to see hatched lines. I'm just doing that to indicate where I'm highlighting. And then if you continue through the loop just a couple hours down the road, if I go to 120, especially, yeah, we'll go to 120. 120 is great because we get that low stamp out of the way. Right in through here, and I'll use a different color so you can see it, all through there is where we could see the transition from rain to snow be interrupted briefly by sleet and freezing rain, which is really going to cause some havoc down in the low levels. So that's why I say, especially in my video today, everybody's going to get a little taste of this storm because we're going to have really good snowfall and heavier rainfall in eastern Canada. We're going to have lots of lake effect and good lake effect snow for much of the Midwest pushing into the Northeast. And then naturally, we're going to have lots and lots of rainfall affecting just about everybody from the south all the way up the eastern seaboard through us in Florida, the mid-Atlantic region, the Appalachians, and so on and so forth. So if you were to try to compartmentalize all of this, this is the amount of, square mileage, or I should just say mileage at this point, where we're going to see impacts from this system varying from winter severe to summer-like spring severe. How bad could the tornadoes get? It really depends. It's really going to depend greatly on what this trough does and what our upper level dynamics do. Because at this time, looking at it being so negatively tilted probably means that we're not going to have nearly as much aggressive vorticity associated with this thing. We still will, but it's not going to be as potent as if, yeah, see, so we're going to have more of an elongated shortwave. And it won't be until we start to get it into that negatively tilted axes where we get a better concentration of it over the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So honestly, a lot of it, if we do get some tornadic activity, is going to be far more short-lived than we previously have seen or previously have forecast, because it's going to be mainly along the line of squalls that forms with that push of cold air. Let me see if I can, let me go to Tropical Tidbits real quick so I can show you guys one of my favorite charts. I've been using this a lot more recently now that we've wandered into full-fledged non-convective season. We'll go back to the Euro. Actually, we'll just use the GFS. The GFS does a pretty decent job. Let's see. Do we have advection here? Do we have advection here? It does. Oh, wait. Yes, we do. Right here. So if we look at our temperature advection, I noticed that this was also a trend that we've been seeing for a little while now. We'll go up to 700 millibars because I can clear the terrain and we can see it coming. As we get that weak Alberta Clipper system that's going to move across the northern tier states up towards the upper Great Lakes, Ontario, that's going to help to funnel down a bit of increased cold air, while our system over the south, if you guys look at these little waves of cold air advection, the blue shading here, those are, I guess you could say, your pushes of cold air. And if you guys watched my video earlier, I made a Santa Claus 2 reference, The Little Nudge, if you guys are familiar with that film, because we have one cold boundary there and one more dense cold boundary up there. And it might be a weaker system, but because it's in an upper latitude region, it's going to have the availability of that more bona fide cold air in the poles, as opposed to down over the United States where we've been modifying thanks to that ridge that's currently overhead. So this is actually, even though it may look like a stronger cold push, it might not be as environmentally strong or dense because it's coming from a modified source region. Whereas this, albeit a weaker system and a weaker low pressure up over there, pushing through, it looks like Manitoba into Ontario, or it could be, I always get those mixed up, British Columbia, Alberta, maybe that's Saskatchewan. One of the two Canadian provinces up there is going to have a much better region or source region to pull actual fresh cold air down out of the Canadian provinces and down to the United States. And as we continue the loop, you can see that there we have it. There's our two distinct boundaries. There's one here and then one down here as our system begins to initiate. So as we have all this rising air and instability and buoyancy supported by our upper height center right here, our anticyclone, down at the surface is our high pressure, steering up our maritime tropical air. We have one cold boundary moving through, and then as we go a couple more panels in, notice how those boundaries are catching up, and then voila, now they are merged. And notice how now we have a very substantial warm sector, a warm conveyor belt, a low-level jet here, and now we have just nothing but cold air advection right in through there. This is when I think if we're going to see some severe weather, it's really going to hit hard as we get closer to, bombarding the eastern seaboard or the eastern coastline of the lower 48. Kind of wish we had a surface chart that we could look at the temperature advection as opposed to just in the upper levels, because it'll probably look a little more apparent there as well. Let me go to College of DuPage real quick. Bear with me. I just want to see if we can find another model that is down close to the surface level to where we can see a bit more of that action going on. So let's see. Surface products. That's not going to do it. Let's go to the GFS. Surface products. Temperature anomaly, dew point, wet bulb, relative humidity, dew point. Well, I guess we'll use the temperature anomaly chart. So see, this is what I was talking about. If you look, right now we have lots of warm anomalies across the west and up into Canada because of that giant sharp amplitude ridge. And that's why I had mentioned earlier that even though we have our lower latitude system pushing across and expecting to bring some cool maritime polar air that's going to quickly modify over the Rockies, as it does so, we're going to have a much better area to tap into some cold air to the north over Canada as this system begins to go. So here's our southern system forming up in our, let me change the ink. Here's our southern system forming up where we've been seeing a lot of our lows spin up, that Oklahoma, Texas panhandle area. And then here's our Alberta Clipper system moving across like this, that's also pumping cold air out of Canada, as I'd mentioned in my video, to reinforce the boundary that's going to be moving through the central and southern plains. Because even though we have all this maritime polar high-pressure ridging across the Rockies, you can see it right in through here, as it overgoes, or I should say, as it moves across the Rockies, not only do you have some of that lee side enhancement because of what's called adiabatic warming, or essentially you warm the air as it sinks in the atmosphere, so as it goes up, cools, comes back down, it warms over the Rocky Mountains. So you're going to have that little bit of modification going on. And then on top of that, because of the warm air that's in place now, in true to the ridge, that's also not going to give us a very good source region to carry a lot of that instability and dense cold pool with it as it forms up over the south. So once we get these two to merge, notice how now we get a much crazier looking high pressure, colder anomalies surging all the way down into Mexico, across the southeast, into the Gulf of Mexico, and then it's going to be a little bit before we get another substantial system like that. You can even see in the GFS it's not predicting anything crazy. In fact, a lot of warm anomalies, which is very interesting, until maybe getting close to Christmas time. It could be a cold Christmas. I don't know why I'm... It could be a cold Christmas. Take a look at this. I know this is the extreme end of the GFS, but look at that. This is December 22nd, and if any of this can hold markedly true, we could be the coldest area of the United States for Christmas time. Take a look at that. All of our cold anomalies are over the south, southeast, up into the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I'm definitely going to be looking at a preliminary Christmas forecast, because I know a lot of people are going to be traveling around that time. Christmas is like the grand finale of holidays before everyone goes into full-fledged party, drink and forget mode, New Year, new me for the New Year's. Gosh, I can't believe, I just want to pause for a second. And, forgive me, but I can't believe that. It felt like just yesterday we were talking about Hurricane Idalia and, Tropical Storm Lee and Tropical Storm Franklin in the Caribbean. And I should say Hurricane Lee. That's what he's more synonymous with, not Tropical Storm. I don't know. I downgraded him. But, it's baffling and it's crazy to know that we're pretty soon going to be saying Happy New Year, guys. That's wild. Wow, and I'm so thankful that my semester in school is over with, because now I can go back to allocating time to doing my content. I'm actually looking at putting even more car shows on my upcoming roster for early next year, which I'm really excited about too. Next 4 to 5 classes I'm going to be taking at MSU are going to be a little on the easier side. No math, no sophisticated science. I'm going to get the rest of my general educations done with. Going to be doing a lot of communication and some more actual meteorology classes as well, which I'm excited about. So it should be a little bit more of a low-key spring into summer semester, and then I can ride that wave and probably take a couple of extra easier courses once I get into summertime, because we know what's happening in the summertime. We got to get ready for hurricane season, and I need to be available to cover that bad boy, because I'm telling you, like I said earlier today, it's going to be a dicey one. But all right, let's continue. Let's continue before I get distracted. Here's what the GFS simulated radar is thinking. So if you look across the south, we actually see the bulk of our most substantial weather right in through here. Let me change the ink again. I always forget to change it. Right in through here, because that's where we have our Alberta Clipper system up there merging with what had formed up over the south plain or the southern plains, funneling an extra layer of cold air in like so. So we actually have like two boundaries, kind of like this. We have frontal boundary 1, which is weaker, and then frontal boundary 2. And as this other one comes in and gives it a little nudge, that's what's going to help to really amp up the severe weather threat. So don't be surprised if Storm Prediction Center suddenly bumps that yellow egg-looking thing a bit to the north. I think that's what's going to end up happening. And then as that cold air really surges down across much of that frontal line, that's when, if you watch what the GFS does, it picks up on it great. Notice how as the cold air comes down, we get a little bit of an increase in the intensity in our thunderstorms, even through Florida, which I've been seeing some very bizarre trends on social media, because you look at this simulated reflectivity, and that looks like some pretty intense action for us here in Florida. If you come over here, And look at what the Euro is thinking for the Southeast, though. It's a totally different ball game. We'll go to Florida specifically, as a matter of fact, and I'll show you guys. Let's see, where are we at? Total precip. Here we go. And you look, and look at this. It's like the frontal line just dies as soon as it crosses Florida. I don't understand that. So, very interesting. We're going to have to see how this shakes out, because it looks like the Panhandle sees really good weather, and then all of a sudden, as soon as it hits Tampa, half an inch, and then barely anything into Central Florida. South Florida looks like they can maybe see like a little sprinkle, like someone's just going to spit on you. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. This is the Canadian model, and this is why I'm very interested to see exactly what shakes out, because if you look, we have very good precipitable water values all the way up into the 2.5 inch range that surge across the Florida peninsula before that front comes down. And I mean, as a synoptic analysis, if you don't see where the front is in this case and how far to the south it's pushing, then just quit. Because there you have it. Look at all this dry air coming in across the United States. Just a tremendous amount of dry polar air. And this is our warm sector. And I love using precipitable water, dew point theta E, to show our different air masses. Right here is what you'd have is your MT. This would be your MP modifying to a CP. Gosh, I'm having flashbacks. Almost looks like I'm doing chemistry right now. And then here is our bona fide continental polar air moving down, slowly modifying into a modified continental polar because of this collision with the maritime tropical air. So, believe it or not, just looking at these air mass designations that I have here, you could already make a case for exactly where our severe weather is going to happen. You have polar air interacting with tropical air, and, you know, you're just naturally going to have a war zone right as these two boundaries collide. There's your crash course in basic meteorology. Basic meteorology tonight. And then this is actually going to be our Euro ensembles for how strong our upper, or I should say our mid-level winds are going to get. And look at how aggressive of a low-level jet we have literally across the United States eastern half. So you have it coming in from the Caribbean, in the Gulf, and then all the way up into, well, I should say well into eastern Canada. Let me go ahead and draw the color again so you guys can see it better. Full eastern half of North America at this point is going to see some low-level jet action, and it's going to be right in through here where we see the bulk of our strongest stuff. That's why I'm very curious as to why the Euro is thinking we're going to dry out suddenly in Florida, but we'll see. We shall definitely see. And I was looking at these just for shoots and giggles earlier, just for old time's sake. And it's very interesting. If you look out over the Atlantic, there's actually something that tries to balloon up once again. Hopefully National Hurricane Center doesn't highlight it, because if they do, then blah, blah, everyone's going to panic. In fact, you know what? Let's go over. I think National Hurricane Center has officially changed their site. Oh, no, they haven't. It's still this chart. I could have sworn that they changed it, though. At least I thought they did. I could have sworn that they went back to the quadrants that you typically see when we're outside of a hurricane season. But never mind. Who else do we have in here? I saw a couple other folks join up. Florida Man 2.0 got some house repairs down today, finally, still a long time ago. Very good. Glad you got that finished up. Daisy, welcome in. Hello from Puerto Rico. Just got in. Thank you very much for joining us. Sorry I missed your comment earlier. Stuart, I'm driving from South Carolina to Canada this weekend. How's it going to be this weekend? Oof. That's going to be a little rough. I'm just going to say that right now, because here's Friday, and then here's Saturday. It really is going to depend on how long you decide to wait until you leave. So, I mean, you're probably going to miss a large majority of it, but by Sunday morning is when that stuff's going to be bearing down on you. And then through the day on Sunday into Monday is when the worst is going to be happening. So you have a small window of time if you get started early enough. If you say, for instance, leave Friday and then try to boogaloo up there up into Sunday, you'll probably miss a large majority of them, be close enough to where you can call it good. Thanks, and it's not so bad. When I started feeling sick, I took medicine right away, so it didn't turn out what it could have been. That's the best, when you nip it in the bud right away. Why is Denver, Colorado always the cold one? It's just because of the mountains and where the systems tend to propagate. You have your Colorado lows, and you have your northern tier lows that just pump cold air right along the leading edge of the Rockies there. And the Front Range all through here is typically where you get most of your dense cold air from Canada, and then you have your maritime polar air that comes across the Rockies, the Pacific Northwest region, and so on. So that's kind of like the convergent point for a lot of that stuff, not only during the winter, but during the summertime as well. Severe weather for Florida or just some rain? I'm definitely sold on some, I wouldn't say severe weather, but some pretty good weather activity for Florida. And you look at the Euro right here, and this doesn't even make sense with what the total precip model is forecasting. You can see a clear line of rain and showers move through the state of Florida. Same thing with the GFS. You take it through time and look at how aggressive that thunderstorm activity gets. So I don't know what's going on with the Euro. Let's go take a look at the GFS real quick before we switch gears here and see what the total precip on the GFS is looking like. Maybe this will tell us a different story. Nope, not at all. So the GFS is also thinking we're barely going to see anything out of this. I wonder why that is. That actually has me stumped. Not going to lie to you guys. Very confused as to why it's going to kind of just do a little dance over Florida and then reignite as it gets back over the Gulf Stream. Very interesting. Maybe because we'll still be under some cooler air, so the surface will not be as active to provide a little bit of additional lift to our storms. Because this is only a couple days out in time. We're not going to, well, no, we will modify out. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot of warm air coming out. I don't know. I don't know. Very interesting. We'll have to see how that shakes out. But, all right, before we wrap up the stream, let's go ahead and shift gears. We're going tropics. We're going to do a little season recap, and I will go ahead and shrink myself down a little bit so you guys can see the loop a little bit more. There we go. Is that good enough? Can you guys? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not going to do that. There we go. That's fine. All right, let's play. So, right out of the gate, for 2023, we're going to start off with January. I didn't get a chance to see this, so this is already pretty neat to see. But this is our no-name storm here that formed up. And if you notice, right about there, here we go. That's where it takes on tropical characteristics. And it's very interesting because it almost looks like it was strong enough to be somewhat of a hurricane almost. It had a pronounced I right there as it began to move up towards Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, I think that is. So very cool to see that on a satellite image. I think that's pretty neat. And then as we go through time, look at how, notice how down here, I'll slow the loop down a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better because I know we're kind of fast forwarding almost. But notice how if you look across the Caribbean, our El Nino shear is already active. We already have lots of wind shear going on across the Gulf and across the Caribbean. You can really see it. See that over the Yucatan, how our storms fire and then die, storms fire and then die. So you see all that moisture is already getting ripped out of the Eastern Pacific and just shooting across the Caribbean and the Gulf. So for all intents and purposes, where we are in the loop as of right now, this is going into 20th of May. This is shut down and this is shut down. There ain't going to be diddly squat in the tropics in terms of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. You can already see right in through here as well as this upper low begins to take shape, this little tut-looking thing, how all of that upper level cirrus is sheared off as well. Doesn't really organize into anything consolidated, and just take a look at how clear we are all through here. Very, very strange for the start of a tropical season, and this is why I'm emphasizing so much what we're looking at for next year, because this is a night and day difference between what our climatology models are thinking could happen for the for the Gulf and the Caribbean. We're expecting that we're going to have all these areas inundated by elevated rainfall and tropical moisture probabilities. So very crazy how you could see just a total different picture in comparison. I think here in a moment we're going to see what comes out across the Gulf. Or I should say, I got to stop saying that, across, on the eastern side of the Gulf. Here comes Arlene any moment now. This is the 27th. Let me speed the loop back up just a little bit. The 27th. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. We'll go to 0.75. Here we go. So you have this moisture coming out of Texas, moving through, and then here we go. So as it starts to marinate over the Gulf, notice how we get an increase in energy. There's our explosion, and then this is what turns into Arlene right at the very beginning of the season, right here. She's going to get going. There it is. She's firing up. And see, once again, though, this is what I'm saying, guys. This is why I think, I'll pause it when it says Arlene. Wait for it. Wait for it. There we go. All right, so let's do a little bit of synoptic analysis while we're here. This is why I'd mentioned, I believe, a few live streams back that this could have been a totally different setup in comparison to El Nino. So as you can see, we have all of this stuff getting sheared and pulled out. That's El Nino right there. So we have all this wind shear already going crazy. I know this is looking really dorked up. I promise my handwriting is a lot better than this computer version of it. There's Arlene, and look at how dangerously close she was to the state of Florida, to the Keys, to Cuba, etc. Mick and Marley. Dag nabbit, Marley just got out. Gots to go fetch her. Thank you all. Congrats again on exam. All right, good night, Mick and Marley. We'll see you next time. I hope you can go wrangling Marley sooner than later. But see, this is what I'm talking about. If we were to erase this El Nino shear, if we were to get rid of the wind shear and get it all out of the equation, it makes you wonder how aggressive of a storm Arlene could have become if we had the exact same setup, that same amount of energy propagate across the, there it is again, propagate through the Gulf and form up off the coastline of Florida. This could have been a very dangerous situation that crept up on us as early as the 1st and 2nd of June. That would have taken a lot of folks off guard and it would have scared a lot of people as well. So we'll definitely have to keep a close eye out on if anything tries to shake out in the exact same way as it did this year over the Gulf. But even right now, guys, look at that. I mean, the entire time we have El Nino. The entire time, all this wind shear. You can see, look at that, perfect example. Look at all that wind shear. That actually almost looks exactly like, you see that? That actually looked exactly like what we had happen at the end of the hurricane season with PTC 22. It just got ripped apart by all that El Nino wind shear. And then you can see all through here, all this clear slotting is because of the dry, dusty air that was coming off of the Sahara. Somebody's talking smack about me. I hear my ear ringing. So pretty neat. Like, look at all that. Like, you can tell that these source regions are done. There's nothing coming out of there. And then we'll fast forward a little bit. Here comes good old Brett and Cindy. We have Brett looking kind of organized out there. Looked pretty impressive out there in the MDR. And then watch what happens as soon as he gets close to the Caribbean. Tries to pass through the Lesser Antilles. You guys got lucky out there. Watch how it just gets ripped to shreds instantly. Here we go. Wind shears. Look at that. Wind shears buffeting it, getting ripped apart, falling apart. No can do. This is a do not fly zone. Brett's gone. Here comes Cindy, also getting ripped apart by that wind shear, very weak, wandering up and trying to dodge it as best as she can. Look at how much wind shear is still plummeting across the Caribbean. Here comes another wave. I think if I'm not mistaken, from my recollection of studying, or not studying, but just watching the tropics this year before starting my YouTube, because if you guys remember, this is June 26th. I wasn't on YouTube at this point. This, I believe, was an Invest 94 or 95L that was moving through. And I remember watching the YouTube videos, too, before YouTube. And I'm going to pause it, too. I'm going to give myself a get-out-of-jail-free car. This was before I was on YouTube, and I remember watching the classic channels. I was watching Mr. Weatherman. I was watching David Schlotthauer. I was watching Pat's Path Predictor. I was watching Weather Girl Danny. I was watching all of them back then before I was on YouTube, and I tell you, this is before I was there, and I saw the hype. I saw all the textbook hype that you typically see on YouTube. Invest 95L. It's getting going quick, guys, and it could form up into, I think it was, who was E? I can't remember who E was. Gosh, who was E this year? Did we have it? Yeah, we obviously had an E this year. That's going to bother me. Who was E this year? Drop that in the comments. What was our E system this year? Because I know we had Arlene, Brett, Cindy, Don, Earl. No, it wasn't Earl. Eric? Aaron? Was it Aaron? No. Who was E? What was our E system this year? I totally forgot. And thank you very much, Sweetie Zenful. I do appreciate that $5 donation. Excellent. Very, very kind of you. Very generous as well. There we go. Thank you. I don't know why I was thinking Eric, Earl. I know Earl's been out there before. Emily, thank you. Everyone was talking, this could be Tropical Storm Emily, and everyone was panicking for the Lesser Antilles, and nothing happened. I remember distinctly when I was working as a personal trainer mentioning to everybody at the crunch I worked at, oh my, everyone's panicking over this Invest 95L thing, and nothing's happening. There's just too much wind shear out there. And everyone was on alert for Invest 95L, and as you guys saw on the satellite, nothing happened. And that's the only little bit of fun shade I'm going to throw just because I wasn't on the YouTubes just yet. And then if you guys recall, we had a very quiet period of time where really nothing was going on out there. We had another brief invest pop up for the Lesser Antilles, float through, but look at all that wind shear just ripping it apart, destroying it. Nothing's coming out of there. Nothing's happening in the Caribbean at all. Our MDR is still quiet because we have all that dusty air still propagating across the the Atlantic. If we fast forward a little bit more, I think we're going to see, there's Don. Don was an interesting anomaly. Look at how far to the north Don is. It's almost into the mid-latitudes at this point. Pushing in, now he's definitely into the mid-latitudes, and I think Don goes hurricane after having crossed that threshold. And I do believe this one here, this little bad boy right there moving through the pattern right here that I'm circling, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is Franklin. I think that once it gets into the Caribbean, this is when Franklin starts to show itself. Nope, maybe not. Never mind. I thought that was Franklin. But just notice how the Caribbean is still dead. The Gulf is still dead. There's no action. No action whatsoever. We had very, very weak, minuscule waves for a good first half of the season. I think this is Franklin right here. I think this is when Franklin gets going. Yep, holding together. There's a little bit of spin in there, and then here we go. I think now, nope, maybe not. Wait. Nope, never mind. Wow, where the heck is Franklin? Hurry up. Another textbook situation where a wave plummets and crashes into the Central American landmass. Where the heck is Franklin? Hurry up, dude. I thought we'd be there by now. We're already going into August. This is July 31st. There it is. Now we're into August 1st. This is as we start the ascension to peak hurricane season. We're kind of riding that roller coaster up. And then once we get to September 10th, that's when we're going to peak out. And that's when the Atlantic does get pretty active. All right. I'm going to make another educated guess and say that this next wave out here is what becomes Franklin. If I'm not mistaken, this bad boy right here riding that MDR train, this, I do believe, is what becomes Franklin. I swear, if I'm wrong again, I'm just going to fast forward. And nope, so that's not Franklin either. Wow, okay, I'm definitely going to fast forward this time. Where the heck is Franklin? Hello, there we go. All right, here we go. Now we got our activity starting to go up. Here's something here. There goes Emily. Here comes another wave. Here comes Franklin going for it. And then if you watch off to the left-hand side, this is when my channel got going. This is when Weather Center Nazario made his appearance, because there goes our Central American gyre activity firing up. There's our system right there. There she blows, coming across the Central America, propagating up to the north, and here we go. There's the main event of the hurricane season. There she is, forming up, throwing us all for curves. This is when Weather Center Nazario was finally doing his thing with his 5 views and his 5 subscribers. There she goes, getting up and getting going, coming right towards the state of Florida, hitting the Big Bend as a Cat 3. And then there goes Franklin, having undergone rapid intensification, became a Cat 5 for a little while out there. We had Jose hanging on for dear life, and then Gert made a random comeback right there. Gert resurrected again out of nowhere. Very crazy. Adalia hung out near Bermuda for a while and then ejected out. And then here, this monstrosity is going to be good old Lee. Gosh, I got so tired of talking about Hurricane Lee, I'm not going to lie. Lee was just a cluster. I remember Lee was like our hype storm. Lee was like the hype storm of the year. Everybody was saying, once Lee got right here, everyone for some reason was literally fear-mongering, like, oh, it's not going north. It's coming straight for Florida. And it's like, please stop. Please calm down. It was during Lee where I finally started having a bunch of insiders with a bunch of my friends off of YouTube talking about hyping up because there was a lot of hype around Hurricane Lee. And honestly, you look at Lee, and Lee's a storm that you can just kind of sit back and watch the fireworks because nothing really happened with Lee. Even Bermuda really didn't see a whole lot from now post-tropical cyclone Lee as it moved up towards the coastline. And then there goes Margot diddly-dallying over the Atlantic. Here comes Nigel smashing through the central Atlantic, trying to make a run for Bermuda. Ends up right in between what was left of Margot. You can kind of see it waving around out and through here. Getting a little bit of convection with it right there. That's what's left of Margot. And then here comes Nigel, gigantic eye. I think it was like over 100 miles wide, almost 200 miles wide of an eye. Big eye. Let's see what's next. I think we have Tropical Storm Beep, Tropical Storm Philippe coming in right here, I think. This raggedy... Oh, yeah, I forgot about Ophelia. Whoops. Ophelia formed up. And, looking at this satellite image, definitely was a subtropical storm in the very beginning of its life cycle. And then right here, right there, that small little blip was definitely a little bit of tropical activity. Subtropical to a tropical system is where my final classification for Ophelia is. And then we have Tropical Storm Philippe, another hype storm, I feel. Philippe was definitely hyped up very badly hyped up. Very disorganized system, never really got going. You look and it's already battling wind shear. Looked disgusting on satellite through all of its lifespan. Here comes Rina, a nice little low riding system right through there. This Fujiwara, everyone's favorite word, interaction that happened between the two really helped to distort the two circulations. And unfortunately, Rina lost this bare knuckle brawl. And Philippe kind of took the cake and came away as the victor, moving towards the Leeward Islands. And, this was kind of the story of the entire hurricane season. We had very, very disorganized systems trying to make... look at this. Thing is like crawling. It's like crawling, getting blasted by a jet in the face. Yeah, trying to crawl towards the Lesser Antilles. It's just a gross storm. You can't even make it out at this point. But, man, let me tell you, there was so much hype around Philippe. And, of course, we had our rains, we had our floods, but... in comparison to what we've seen in the past, it's another one of those storms that I feel we need to warn people of what's expected and just leave it at that. We don't need to go off the chain mentioning Tropical Storm Philippe, 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Everything's going to explode. It's going to be Oppenheimer on steroids. No, guys, come on. And this was very interesting. You can see our subtropical jet spinning up our low that wandered off the southeast right here. A lot of folks will still tell you that Philippe split in half. That's not what happened. Lee. See, I have PTSD from Lee. Philippe is right here getting sheared apart, and then here is our upper level low that's now transitioning down to the surface. And as the subtropical jet broke through right here, if you watch the cloud feature right there, I'm going to get rid of that X so you guys can see it a little bit clearer, and I'll go back just a couple panels. If you watch the cloud band right here, watch how the jet breaks through right there. See that? Breaks through, starts feeding into this low, and as the jet punches through, it essentially just wipes out what's left of Philippe. So here's Philippe down here. There's our extratropical upper low that turned into a huge barotropic low. Philippe was washed out entirely. It didn't split in half. Philippe just kind of got punched out into the Atlantic by that jet stream. Nice little right cross. There's Sean that kind of did some random stuff. And then, hey, by the way, this is the system right there. There's our big old tornado outbreak that hit Florida. There's our Gulf blob that we were forecasting for 2-ish weeks in advance. Nailed that sucker right on the head. That blew through. There's Friday the 13th, October. We're getting close to the end now before we wrap up. And then we definitely wander into hype territory for the rest of this video. Sean was obliterated, got sucked out to open water, and here comes our next invest. This was Hurricane Tammy. There goes Tammy, the final storm of the season, getting going right there. Another disorganized system that managed to try to recollect itself, go hurricane as this gigantic trough is digging in. One of our first real bold trough axes coming across the United States down into the Caribbean that helped to suck it out. And there you have it. There's our Barbuda landfall pulling up and out, and that's that. This right here, once she washes out, that is the end of the hurricane season. that is the end of the hurricane season. So there goes Rena. Had a little bit of rapid intensification for a brief moment there. Tammy, I said Rena, gosh. And there you have it. This is the end of the hurricane season. From here on out, it's all from here on out, I got to admit, this is where we just get into hype territory. We had invest after spin after spin. There's one of our invests right there. Everyone freaked out, hype, and then hurricane, big time hurricane. Then here's our next little thing that was hyped. Nothing came of it. Let's see. When's our next thing going to pop up? Let's see. Here's our other weak thing right here. This was, I think, Invest 97. That got hyped. Nothing happened. I'm telling you, the rest of the hurricane season, all hype. I mean, look at where they're trying to form. They're not going to form down there. Nothing's going to form down there. El Nino had us tapped, had us shut down. Look at all this stuff screaming across. El Nino is in full effect. It's screaming all the way through there. Just nothing but El Nino. And yes, Robert, you're right. Vince Jr. should be popping up here any moment now. We have our jet reorienting across the Gulf of Mexico. Any moment now, we're going to have PTC 22 pop up over the Southern Caribbean. That's our final hype storm for the season. I think we're getting close right now to when Vince Jr. is going to form up. I see this increase in moisture coming across the south, coming across Mexico. And yeah, here we go. All right, so we're going to have our energy down here, PTC 22, and then here comes Vince Jr. screaming across the Gulf of Mexico right there. Any moment now, we're going to see it really ignite. Yep, there it goes, propagating across, and then here we go. There it is right there, forming up, and then blowing through. And then here it goes, PTC 22, blasting as much as it could, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic. Hype storm, and then it transitions into this gigantic comma feature that just sweeps through the Atlantic, through Bermuda, out of the Caribbean, and honestly, that's like the end. That was the conclusion of hurricane season. Because after that, nothing. That is the end. Let's go ahead and play Adele's Skyfall. This is the end. Hold your breath and count to 10. And yep, then we're done. Game over. That was the hurricane season of 2023. Technically speaking, very uneventful for a lot of people, but very eventful for those of us studying the hurricane season, with a lot of good information to take away and keep in our back pocket for next hurricane season. Because we're definitely going to see a very, very, very dramatic difference between the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea we saw at the beginning of this hurricane season as compared to next season. I'm telling you, I would not be surprised, guys, if we were bracing for a potential landfall as early as June or July, especially at the rate we're going. You never know. Nomad Cat 4. I have been seeing Cyclone Jasper. We got to hold on to tropics one way or another. So let's go out to Cyclone Jasper blowing up, even though it's only at 85 knot winds. I wonder if it's going to get stronger than that. We don't have any of our intensity guidance. There goes Cyclone Jasper, though. This thing is probably going to explode any moment now. Looking at that central pressure, it's definitely going to, the winds are going to catch up very soon. Look at how it turns the opposite way. That's the southern hemisphere for you. That's pretty neat. Turning the opposite direction. It's turning the same direction as a high pressure would up in our neck of the woods. Very cool stuff. Doesn't look very organized, though. Not too organized. But all right, guys. That was a little bit of a glimpse. I shouldn't say a little bit. We all rode out the hurricane season, but that was our last second look at the 2023 hurricane season as we wash our hands of it. Sprit. I'm just kidding. I'm not actually spraying myself. This is a screen cleaner because I spit a lot. And then we're just tracking what's coming up next for us here in the United States and that random blob of stuff that's going on in the Caribbean that could possibly create some rain for the Yucatan and Belize. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the stream, folks. We will see you next time for another full-fledged Weather Center segment. Maybe not tomorrow or Friday because I have to do my military processing. So no segment tomorrow or Friday, but we should be back in time to do a live on Friday. We'll see. I might be busy. It's going to be a busy weekend for me, so to be determined. I'll definitely update you guys on whether or not we're going to do a live on Friday. But that's that. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your Wednesday evening to talk a little bit of United States baroclinic polar winter weather, as well as a little bit of a recap on what the tropics did for us throughout 2023. And as we get ready to round out the end of the year, folks, I hope that you get your travel plans ordered and straightened out before it's too late. And I hope we look forward to a marvelous holiday season as we get closer and closer to Christmas and New Year's. And I definitely want to promote a little bit of holiday cheer and festivity like I always do on this channel as we get closer to Christmas. And I may even do a very brief live stream on New Year's just to see what everyone's doing, see how everyone's doing, and then call it within like 5-10 minutes just to say hello. All right? So thank you all for watching. Thank you for tuning into my video earlier today. It was great being back in front of the camera. Hopefully we can start doing that on a bit more of a repetitive basis now that I have a bit more free time once I get through this weekend of military processing, pre-entry processing. I want to say between Sunday all the way through to Christmas, it's going to be a very chill schedule for me. So I could be reappearing here and on other social media platforms a little bit more so. So we'll see. But I appreciate you guys. Zenful, thank you again, sweetie, for the wonderful donation. I do appreciate it, guys. And we'll see you again soon. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.